Rigby's Roads, Chapter 13, Death and Taxes. It had now been a little over a week since Jack had officially met his neighbor, Rita, and in that short time he had realized she was flirting with him. It was those subtle coincidences that seemed to show a pattern. She would be watering her plants or weeding in her front garden every time he came home from work. She would give that over-friendly wave, which he acknowledged with his newly found nod. It was bad timing on her part. He was not in the mood for flirting. His IRS appointment was today. He had to get Henry to go to Sturgis with him somehow. He had to get the FBI off his back. And to top it all off, it was the anniversary of Emily's death this Saturday. Rita was not even a blip on the radar screen. In his conversations with Jerry during the week, Jack learned that Yogi had contacted him only twice since his disappearance. The first time was the day after he was kidnapped, asking Jerry to complete Operation Dogshit, which was an outstanding success. The second email was a short note with a cryptic message that Jerry didn't understand, but Jack understood completely. No danger, Y-phone confiscated, can't email, home or work, HKL, and maybe other things. Simple ticket exchange ends all. See you soon. Why? Jack gathered all his IRS paperwork for the big showdown, including the folder that Yogi had dug up on Paxton and his daughter. It was painful to read the obituary because it was a link to his own grief. He was bringing the folder to the audit as ammunition to confront Paxton's personal attacks on him. Paxton had to stop taking his personal loss out on him, and it was going to stop today. While sitting in the waiting room at the IRS office, Jack looked around the room. A 300-pound bald man was sweating so profusely he was leaving watermarks on the side of the cardboard box on his lap. Next to him was a thin-looking man with thick glasses, and he had a two-wheeled cart with 4 boxes that were overflowing with papers. A young Hispanic woman in a short skirt and low-cut purple blouse kept crossing her long legs, first one way, then back again, as if she was rehearsing. Another woman in her late 20s was dressed as if she had been cleaning out her garage. She wore old faded jeans with many slits and holes and had a tie-dyed t-shirt from the 60s. She had 4 small children with her, ranging in age from 4 to 6 years old. They were running around, yelling, playing tag in the office. The secretary, who was keeping track of the death march into the private offices, announced, "Mr. Logan?" The oversized, sweating man struggled to get up out of his chair, and when he managed to do so, the children who were playing tag used him to avoid getting caught as they chased one another in a circle around him. He stared straight ahead at the office door as he walked slowly to his private one-on-one. He was oblivious to the children's recess activity happening around him. As the afternoon went by, the IRS victims entered one of 3 doors. Each person had their eyes locked onto the door they were about to enter, as if they were going to the electric chair. When they came back out, it was always one of 2 scenarios. They were either smiling like they had just won the lottery, or they looked like they were told that all of their teeth would have to be pulled out on national TV without Novocaine. The secretary informed them of the next challenger. "Mr. Pensworth?" Nobody acknowledged. "Mr. Pensworth. Arnold Pensworth." Everyone looked around the room, trying to see whose turn it was. As the heads turned from side to side, trying to spot the next victim, it soon became apparent that everyone was involved in this guessing game, except the bookworm with a cart of boxes. He continued to stare straight ahead. One by one, the waiting room's focus stopped at his blank stare, until finally the woman next to him poked him with her elbow. "That's you," she said, like she had known him for years. The entire room felt bad for him. They could see the mountain of paperwork he brought, and they knew he would not be coming out of that room for hours. The woman with the kids took the shortest time, only about 15 minutes. When she came out, she handed each of her children a $1 bill. "Okay, here's your money. You can stop playing tag now." Everyone in the room laughed as they realized her devious plan had worked. Jack wondered if they really were her kids. About 2 hours later, his focus was interrupted with, Mr. Rigby? Jack stood up, took a deep breath, and marched to the door. There was only one person left in the waiting room, the woman with the low-cut blouse. She smiled at him while she continued to chew her gum at a rapid pace. As Jack approached the door, he was nervous, not of being audited, but of how this conversation would unfold the truth. Jack was going to audit him, not the other way around. He entered the room and closed the door behind him, still not looking at his executioner. He sat in the chair next to the big desk, and finally their eyes met. His mind froze. He wanted to speak first, but he couldn't say anything. He was in a staring contest. Finally, he went on offense and dropped his folder on the desk, and some of the papers slid out. Paxton looked down at the papers that were fanned out like a deck of cards. He saw the obituary of his daughter on top. He picked up the papers, put them in his lap, leaned the folder against the desk's edge, and proceeded to read each and every paper that Yogi had dug up. It was Paxton's life story, his education, credit history, bank accounts, even his IRS records. He never looked up. As the minutes went by, Jack became more nervous, wondering if this was going to backfire on him. After about 15 minutes of agonizing silence, he closed the folder and said to Jack, "Thank you." Jack was waiting for him to finish his sentence or say something else, but that's all that came out. Paxton picked up his pencil and started tapping the eraser on the desk while he stared into space. Jack repostured himself in the chair. "Thank you for what?" Paxton's eyes started to swell up, and with a few blinks, some tears started to fall down his cheeks. He reached for a tissue that was normally on his desk for his victims of bad news. "I'm sorry I took it out on you all those years. When Lynn died that night, a piece of me died with her. She was not only my daughter, she was my best friend. She taught classes at the immigration office on how to fill out tax papers for those who couldn't read or were new to this country. I gave her lists all the time of people who would come in here and needed help. She meant more to me than anything in the world." Jack felt like he was smacked in the face. He was seeing a side of Paxton he had never imagined. Paxton continued, "If I had known that the man who killed our loved ones had a stepbrother with this kind of driving record, I never would have focused my personal revenge on you all these years. I can't thank you enough for this." Jack's facial expression turned to total confusion. "What the hell are you talking about?" Paxton pointed to the folder. "These papers on Reginald McCrae, speeding tickets, running red lights, improper start, reckless driving in a school zone, leaving the scene of an accident, driving with a suspended license." Jack pulled the folder away from Paxton. "Let me see that." Sure enough, there was an entire rap sheet on that kid that Yogi added to the folder. Yogi had written across the top, "Stepbrother of the driver who caused the accident of Lynn Bolton." Not only had Yogi pulled up this kid's driving records and his tax records, he also had his school records that verified the kid was a menace to society. As he turned the next page and saw McCrae's vehicle registration, it hit him all at once. He said out loud, 1969 red Plymouth two-door. "What's the matter?" Paxton asked, seeing the startled expression on Jack's face. Jack looked up at Paxton, but he changed his focus back to the printout of the car registration that showed the owner's street as his own. It was the same speeding red car that had haunted him every day down his block. I just realized I know this car," Paxton added. "Well, he won't have it for long. I'm going to get this bastard. You can count on that. I see he wrote the word tips in red on his copy of his 1040. He lists his occupation as waiter. Some waiters cheat on this part of their taxes. He's doomed for a big surprise. Tell me, how did you discover McCrae was part of this accident? The police never mentioned a third car. How the hell did you get a copy of his tax returns?" Jack shook his head. "I'm sorry, but I can't tell you that. I was desperate. It might put a friend in jeopardy. I'm hoping you'll let that slide. A person will stoop to new lows in their fight for what they believe is right. I think we both have learned that lesson today. Look, I'm not one to tell you your business, but you might want to let this go, put it to rest, and go on with your life. It's been hard on me too, and I have recently reached the point that allowed me to put my wife's death behind me. I wouldn't recommend my way, but you need to look for an opening that allows you to move on. Today may be that opening." Jack extended his hand, which Paxton shook in deep appreciation. Paxton added, "Again, I apologize, and thank you for giving me something to think about." As he left the office, Jack realized that another chapter of his aggravating past was closed, thanks to Yogi. Early Saturday morning, he decided to do something different this year. His previous visits to the cemetery each year had become a sad, formal affair, dressing as if he were going to church, which he hadn't been to since the funeral. Today, he put on his leather jacket, boots, and rode his Harley. It was 6:30 in the morning, still cool from the night air, and the sun was starting to shoot its colors from the eastern plains. He rode along the edge of the mountains first and stopped at a roadside patch of wildflowers. He picked handfuls, carefully choosing different varieties, and put them in his bike bag. He realized that picking these wildflowers presented itself as a diverse fork in the road with two distinct meanings. Down one road, he was picking flowers for a young pretty girl at work. It was a simple gesture of flirting and trying to get some attention, as well as a way to bring a smile into someone's life. Down the other road, he was bringing flowers to a gravesite, trying to be thoughtful and leaving something behind after he left. This simple gesture had an important meaning for him. Around 7 a.m., he rode into the Mountain View Cemetery in Boulder. He was careful to keep the Harley at its quietest idling speed, so as not to draw attention to himself. There was an elderly gentleman with a cane standing by a headstone, who never turned to notice him. In the corner was a young man with two small children, who were 3 or 4 years old. He was sitting near a grave, crying, while the children were playing Follow the Leader, walking around the sites nearby, stepping in each other's footprints in the matted down green grass. As Jack approached Emily's site with his makeshift bouquet of flowers in hand, he suddenly stopped in his tracks and stared ahead. It was a wondrous sight that made him break down and cry. Surrounding Em's grave was a sea of white gardenia flowers that stood out amongst their own green leaves. Gardenias had been her favorite flower, as was easily noted in many pictures around the house. He stood 20 feet away, unable to move closer, stunned by the beautiful display. A few minutes later, his crying subsided, and he approached the grave. He said hello to Em and started to tell her the adventure that he had been on. "I'm sorry I didn't meet up with you like I had intended. There's been a change of plans." He smiled and said proudly, "I have a motorcycle now," as he looked back at where it was parked, and then he moved to the left so she could get an unobstructed view. "See, it's a Harley. How about that? I wish I could take you for a ride." He paused and wiped away some tears. "I made a new friend who has been helping me. His name's Wheels, and I've been watching this kid. Well, actually, he's been watching me. You know, I told you about him before. His name's Yogi, like the bear, and he's a genius. He's 15 and has a psychology degree from Stanford University. Can you believe that? I'm sure he's responsible for these beautiful flowers. Probably charged them to the paper thief, but don't worry about that. I know he has it covered. He's really a great kid, and I know you two would get along great." Jack then proceeded to tell her about the lottery tickets, the bag, and the FBI. Jack went down the list of things that Yogi had helped him with, and he sprinkled his review with updates of Henry's exploits. He hesitated to tell her about work because he didn't know how to mention Bonnie and his feelings toward her, but he figured she already knew, so he started to confess anyway. "Of course, I guess you know about Bonnie. She's a really nice girl. I've been helping her at work, trying to get her to come out of her shell. I like her a lot, but not the way I loved you. I took her for a ride on the motorcycle. It's hard to explain, but she has helped awaken something in me, and I need that to stay alive. I hope you understand." It felt good to say it out loud and get it off his chest. It wasn't like he was madly in love with Bonnie or like he was asking permission to fool around. He just needed to get it out in the open. It made him feel honorable to say it. Looking down at his hand, he realized he still had the bouquet of hand-picked flowers. He looked down at the arrangement on the ground, then back at the flowers in his hand. The ones he had picked today were similar to the ones he had given to Bonnie, and he wanted to even the playing field, showing an equal gesture to Em. The laughter of the children playing nearby was such an unusual sound at the cemetery. How innocent and full of life they were, while their father grieved so deeply. Jack picked out a few gardenias to make room for his personalized bunch. He took them over to the kids who were still playing Follow the Leader. The young man looked up at him, holding the flowers, and Jack gestured toward the kids as if to ask permission. The young man smiled through his tears and nodded back. Jack extended his arms with the offering to the children, and they took the gardenias and smelled them. They politely thanked them in the quietest of voices, and then continued their game with flowers in hand. The young man nodded thanks, and Jack returned the gesture with the same nod. As Jack turned to go back, he noticed someone approaching Em's grave. It was Paxton. He was crying. Jack stared at him with a confused look on his face. Paxton struggled to talk as his sobbing interfered. "I don't know what to say," as he pointed to another gravesite about 30 yards away that appeared to have the same flower arrangement as Em's. Paxton added, "Lynn loved gardenias. How did you know?" Then the most amazing thing happened. Paxton hugged him, and they stood there together, hugging each other and crying. He looked over Paxton's shoulder at the same display of flowers in the distance. Yogi again. This was probably his backup plan in case the meeting with Paxton didn't go well. He thinks of everything. After a while, Paxton took Jack over to Lynn's grave and introduced him to her. It was one of those things that seem all right if you do it, but a little crazy when someone else does it. But he didn't mind. It was cathartic for Paxton, as he openly confessed his wrongful condemnation of Jack. They talked for more than an hour, as Jack met the real Lou Paxton, the human being. When it was time to go, they hugged one last time, and Paxton thanked him for the unbelievable flower arrangement. Jack added with a smile, "Those flowers are tax-deductible, right?" And that made them both laugh. As Jack rode home, his mind was on Sturgis. He needed to acquire the bag for the FBI, and more importantly, he had to ensure Yogi's safe return. But first, there was the challenge of getting Henry to go with him. How the hell was he going to explain that to Henry without really explaining it to him? And what kind of complicated bullshit could he come up with now that would make sense? End chapter 13.